Good morning and welcome to another episode of Better Business, Better Life. I'm your host, Debra Chantry-Taylor, and I'm passionate about helping entrepreneurs lead their ideal lives by creating better businesses. I'm a certified EOS implementer, an FBA-accredited family business advisor, and a business owner myself with several business interests. I work with established business owners and their leadership teams to help them live their ideal entrepreneurial life using EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And the guests that I have come onto my show, they're here to share authentically both the highs and the lows of creating a successful business and how they turn things around in their business, either using EOS tools and traction or just sharing the stories of the things that they've actually encountered.
Be crazy to do a startup with money, thinking, oh, I want to be a unicorn, I want to be a billionaire, and I want to build rockets to Mars like all the rest of them. No, that's not a good reason. Like, be passionate, try and do something that you believe in, know your purpose. That's really, really important, particularly if you want to sustain it. And also, of course, it gets to a point, and I think this is the hardest thing, right? And we're at that point quite a few times. Okay, what do we do? Do we keep going or do we stop here? And I always remember that image of the guy digging for gold. He's going through the dirt and he's like an inch away and then he stops. I always thought, oh, that's us, but we've got to keep going a bit more. And look, in hindsight, anyone can say, oh, I should have this, I should have that.
Today is actually pretty exciting because I've actually got a guy who's very, very similar to myself. We've just been having a chat before, and he is really passionate about actually helping people learn from their failures. So our guest today is the founder of YesVR, and I've been told it's okay to say that it's a startup failure that may yet rise from the ashes. He is really passionate about people doing good things, and he is also a podcast host himself. So he's going to share with us today about how telling stories can really help and how we can learn from failure. Paul King is the podcast host of Fail Wisdom, a podcast about failure and what we can learn from them. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Thank you. It's great to be on, Deborah, and looking forward to having a chat with you.
Yeah, no, we had a quick chat before, as we always do, and I think the great thing is we share similar kind of passions. I don't believe failure is a bad word. Yeah, the F word, it's not a bad thing. As long as we learn from those mistakes, then it's always a good thing, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sort of on a mission to even change the way people think about that, Like, if you think about it, if we don't fail, then we won't do anything. Just sit on your couch. You'll never fail. Just don't do anything and you won't fail, right? But if you want to learn and get ahead, then you fail and you learn from that. And there's nothing wrong with failure. It's just part of life. It's actually a good thing. And that's why, just like yourself, a lot of people are sick of all the success stories, like you're saying before, it's on the beach 4 hours a day and, they're a, $1 billion business or whatever. But the reality is, in the startup world particularly, that's where I'm coming from. I think it's like 1 in 20 actually succeed. But then, what is success anyway? Because a lot of startups will then go into another one and another one. But business is hard enough, but startups where you're trying to sell something that is like a future thing that nobody knows yet is even harder. Like you're selling a future vision. So that is even harder, as me and my co-founder found out over the years.
Yeah, so 6 years with YesVR. Tell me a little bit about that. So tell me where did the idea come from? What was the journey that you went on with that?
Yeah,
company.
It's a pretty amazing journey. Oh, look, my background and my co-founder were both in education. We're both educators, and we were training people in the online space. So we actually worked for the largest training organization in the Southern Hemisphere for many years. And what we found is students were pretty bored, not very engaged, and really low completion rate, actually. And so I was at a convention in 2016 and I went outside and there's all these demo desks and this guy's like, hey, you want to try this VR? And I'm thinking, oh, this VR stuff could be interesting, like see things in 3D, what's this all about? So I put on the headset and I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. I'm going to die. Look, I fall, like, what's going on? So I took it off again. It's like, yeah, did you enjoy the helicopter ride over Sydney? It was like, wow, it just blew me away because it actually felt like I was there. So I found that really exciting. And then over like a few months, I was thinking, imagine if you could actually place students in the actual workplace that they're going to go into, and they experience that and they make decisions and they see the consequences firsthand, but in a safe space. So they get to experience that. So I started filming 360 VR because I've got a background in filming. Something like, I'm always a self-taught guy. I might have degrees and diplomas, but all the areas I end up getting into are the areas that I teach myself. So it's funny, but yeah, so we started filming some stuff, putting scenarios together. And then we found that, for what we wanted, there was no technology at that time, this was 2017, that we could put the scenarios together that we wanted. And so then we got in contact because, like, I've done a little bit of programming, but I am a right brain person, very creative. I'll be struggling with programming, like take me like half a day to work out something where some 18-year-old will go, well, that's it. Okay. I'm like, okay, forget about programming. Anyway, so we started down the development track. We got in touch because that time, funds were low. We got in touch with a developer actually in Ukraine. That was Dima, lovely guy. He said, yes, I can build this platform for you. It will take 6 weeks and then 3 hours per scenario after that. So fantastic. 5 years later, at $700,000 down the track. It just, if you don't know development, and even if you do, double it, quadruple how much it's going to cost, and 10 times that for the time it's going to take. A lot of lessons still to be learned there. For example, just don't develop that much and put money somewhere else, and we can talk about that. But yeah, we developed the platform and we actually won lots of awards. Well, it's called the LearnX Design. So anyone in the learning design space, that's the top awards. And we won heaps because my co-founder, Diane, was a brilliant educator, and she put some amazing learning design, and we did amazing, like we got the actors to do these amazing performances and put together in a way that was really creative for the time. And then we got an intern who became a sales guy, a lovely guy from Chile, and he started getting it out there and starting to sell. And then we had a few training organizations that were going to go ahead with us, and that was late 2019. So you know what happens after that, right? COVID, everything stops, 2 years. And yeah, then we thought, maybe we shouldn't be in the hospitality space. Let's look at aged care. Let's look at this. No, aged care, they don't want to pay any money either, just like hospitality people. And yeah, and so after COVID, then we actually came really, really close to some big deals. I could tell you that story later about one with one of the head and owner of one of the major supermarkets here has a chain of hotels, because we're in the hospitality space because that's where my co-founder was in. So that was the training, like responsible service, alcohol, customer service and all that. And so the head of that organization was really keen on our training. He tried it out and he flew down from Queensland to the incubator at Macquarie Uni that we're situated in. But, I can tell you the story about that a bit later. And then COVID came along and so after COVID, we just lacked in the sales area. So Diane, my co-founder, she hated sales. I wasn't keen either. And being a person that was adopted, rejection is a big issue. So it's not fun constantly getting rejected. But B2B sales is, like I learned a lot, but it is a long-term thing, 3 months to maybe 18 months for a sale. And then we got so close and then pulled out. And then I think it was like a year ago, we had an investor that was massive in the hospitality space. We were going to take us, all around the world. He was going to put in a lot of money for like 20% of the business. And then that all was going through. And then the last minute, pulled out. And so after 6 years and being so close and then this happening, my co-founder, she just like, no, I've had enough. And she just left for 3 months, pretty much left. And then I was struggling for 3 months and I just thought, oh, I can't do this anymore. And then I just pulled out as well. And I spent 2 weeks because, obviously you're upset about it. You put 6 years of your life, a lot of money. None of us were paid ever. And I spent 2 weeks watching the series Breaking Bad on my phone, on the TV. That's all I did for 2 weeks because it totally engaged me. It sounds crazy, but that's what helped me to get over that, And then after that, I thought, oh, what am I going to do? You know what? I want to do something I really love because I love the whole filming side and working with actors. I've done courses on directing. I loved all that side. That was 1% because we didn't have the money to do too much of it. However, having said that, the first scenarios we actually did that on a shoestring budget, practically for nothing, which was pretty amazing. And I can tell you that story too if you want, but so many stories. Yeah, and so I started the podcast because I think, I'm just going to do something I really love. I love helping people. I had a community radio show. I love that. I'm going to help early stage startup founders where I was so they can learn lessons from others about failures, not talking about successes. But interview successful people, but I want to know about your failure. And so people can learn from those stories. So I wish I had my podcast when I started in those first few years. So yeah, that's my story about YesVR. Bit long-winded.
No, that's great. So I'm going to take you back a little bit because you said that, you obviously any kind of IT or development project, yes, you can basically take whatever they say, multiply it by 3 or 4 times and 10 times the amount of time. That's pretty standard, I think, for those things. But you said that you didn't really understand what was going to be required in terms of sales. And I remember when I used to do market validation at the Ice House with startup businesses, I always say to them, no matter what you spend on development, you should actually allow the same amount of money to invest in sales and marketing because you think you're going to build it and they're just going to come and that's it. But that's not the way that it works. You have to put a lot of effort in. And like you said, long sales cycles. You're trying to convince people to use something they've maybe never used before. So for those listening out there who's like, but the idea is so great, everybody's going to come and use it, what would you say to them?
I'd say absolutely. Instead of just doing a whole massive amount of development, just do your MVP, really basic. And then with that, go and spend most of your money on sales and marketing. That was the mistake that we did. And I'll tell you why. Because we had some other companies that were just doing pretty much the same thing as us that came along later. It's a bit about timing as well because it was early days. And then they got investment. I'm friends with one of the CEOs and he's like, got a team of 10 business development people. And they're now all around the world. And they're pretty much doing what we're doing. And they did that in 2 years. So in 6 years, because in the end, like our runway, it was running out and we had developers and we thought, no, we can't get rid of the developers because, we still need to develop this and that and make it better. No, mistake. And holding on to employees as well, like, we're like a sort of a family in a way. And then thinking, will they get another job? Unfortunately, business is a bit brutal. We have a lovely business culture, but you just got to let people go early if things aren't going well. Put the money into sales and marketing. I mean, we also had some bad experience. We had a sales guy after COVID. He came in and was like, top guy, recommended. And because we didn't know much about it, it's like, yeah, like I'm on it and I'm talking to the head of this organization and that organization. Oh, yeah, we're really close. Then after, I think 4 or 5 months, like things like can't be right. Like, can you just give us like all your contacts? He said, yeah. He was always say, no, I do everything by hand. And he'd show a sheet of paper. And so what we got after 5 months was a list of 135 people, most of them saying, make contact or something. And in negotiation, and I rang 10 of them and I said, who is, I'll just call him John. John? No, I haven't heard of him. So yeah, you got to be careful too. Like, we're pretty gullible, I think. That was our luck with sales. So we thought, a lot of people say, just do it yourself. And I think if you can do it yourself, and I did do some good sales courses, and I came really close. I just couldn't close some of those big deals. And some people will lead you on as well. Say, no, we want to go ahead. We want to go ahead. And then you'll send another email and you contact, no, we're just busy this week. This went on for months sometimes. And it's just like, I think at some stage you've got to send something saying, look, either you want to go ahead with this like in a nice way, or, well, I've got to move on. And maybe they'll respond, I don't know that, but you're sort of desperate in a way because all the money is running out and you really need a sale. What you got is great. And yeah, and that's the worst thing as well. If you're desperate, you're doing sales, people pick that up.
Yeah. You can't afford to be. Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. I think it's the worst place to be in. You've got to actually have, what do they say? You shouldn't actually be wed to the outcome at all. You should be there to offer your help, and don't be wed to the outcome. If they just say no, that so be it. But I think what's really interesting, so a lot of the people listening to this podcast tend to have more established businesses, but the same principles apply when you're looking at introducing a new product or a new service into your business as well. We tend to get carried away by the next great big idea, and it's all going to be amazing. But it actually requires some validation. It requires, a huge investment in terms of people going out there. In terms of your salesperson, I wonder if there is something around what you are measuring with them. We'll call him John. So, whether or not the stuff that you are holding him accountable for from a scorecard, basics, measurables, I wonder if you could have picked it up any earlier.
Yeah, look, now if I was to do it again and talk to other salespeople, I said, if it's not written down in HubSpot or whatever, then it didn't happen. So that we would have like daily updates, everything to be put down in your CRM, and and daily, weekly updates, and really monitor them well. And not just like, oh yeah, I'm really close. Yeah, I've got this big one, this big fish, and blah blah blah. Just going on people's words. That was really ignorant of us, and also the stories. His mother died, his sister got paralyzed. In the end, we're thinking, it's possible? We felt sorry for him as well. And, I think it was I actually think he had some sort of vice, and he was just getting some extra money. And, look, you learn from it,
You do. I think it's interesting that you said that, if you can do sales yourself, you should do. I think it's really hard to have a business where you're the only person that can actually sell. So I do believe that you do need help in terms of getting extra salespeople in there. What would you do differently in terms of employing a salesperson now? So what are the lessons that you've learned from John?
Well, what would I do differently? I would, I went through a sales group before and they recommended him. This time I would interview them myself. I mean, we did an interview, but I would interview them myself and see their sales record, try and get somebody also in the same area with connection. Let's say we're in hospitality, so someone with a hospitality background that has connections to those area, I think is really important. And as I said, everything has to be written down, everything monitored, and make sure if nothing's happening within like even a month or 2 months, and there's no proof or then just,
Yeah, was it? They say hire slowly, fire fast.
Yeah. That's I think Gary Vee talks about that. Well, I think he's hire fast, fire fast.
All right, okay. I reckon hire slowly, fire fast, because making sure you've got people who share the right core values and that actually will fit in with your own organization and can prove their things. Interesting what you were saying about the clients. I don't know what it's like where you are, but certainly in New Zealand, I think there's this whole thing about not wanting to say no. So it's almost like we want to appease people. And so we will keep saying yes. We don't want to actually just say no. I'm British. We're a little bit like that. But at the end of the day, we're also kind of prepared to go, you know what? I'm just not interested. Leave me alone. It's interesting when you're in B2B sales, people do tend to kind of, drag it out and try really hard. I don't know if they're trying not to say no or if they're thinking they'll make you feel good. But tell me a bit more about that experience for you. So you had people who were saying, yeah, we're interested, but we've just got this on or we've just got that on. Tell me how that worked.
There was one group, the hospitality group, and they were interested, but it was through another contact of ours in Melbourne. So we had like these amazing contacts, and these guys they knew a lot of people in the space, and so they would show them what we have on the headset. And so I was in Melbourne just pre-COVID as well with this group, talking to the general manager or the CEO and someone else, and they were quite interested, but they were saying, but if only we had, not just RSA, but also I think they wanted something on money laundering or something like that. And that's another lesson as well. Like you can't just cater to everybody. You got to start with what you have. And I should have said, well, that could be something we'll do later. Let's get started with this. And they weren't quite convinced. And then after COVID, this contact got in touch with them again and said, yeah, no, we're interested. We want to go ahead. And we offered them a really good deal. And every week he said, no, I'm just a bit busy at the moment, but I'm still interested. Just went on for months and months. In the end, I just, and there was another training organization as well. And they were really interested to do something with us. And what they wanted to do as well is to do some sort of profit sharing, right? And then they were really keen to go ahead. And then that's just through another contact as well. And then they just went quiet as well. And nothing happened. And the funny thing is, as you say, we could be resurrected. That same training group now has done a trial with us, and they're looking at maybe signing a contract where we will profit share with them, and they'll introduce it to other groups. And we've also had, we're not doing any sales, we've had 2 other groups approach us as well. And I have to say as well, say a month or 2 after everything went to pieces, I get a phone call, because I get a lot of phone calls like, we're an IT group and we can help you out. I just thought it was one of those. Said, oh, hi. So look, before you go any further, YesVR is no longer. I said, oh, and I said, oh, just by the way, who are you? Said, oh, I'm Sarah from a major hospitality group. And we looked at your website and I'm like, well, actually, we've stopped, but you could buy us if you want. But I never heard back from her. So always ask who it is first before you, say, oh, no, we're finished. Because anyway, so the funny thing is these people are coming out of the woodwork, but I think it's a bit to do with timing as well. Because when we started, I could tell you a story about this first demo we did. Oh, it was an absolute disaster with, what we had to have then with phones and stuff. And it was such early days. People just didn't know what VR was. As compared to now, nearly everyone does. And most people have tried it as well. So timing is really important. We were really the first in Australia doing this. And that's not necessarily a good thing,
There's some say, I can't remember who said it, but it's actually, you're best to be second in the market. The first one actually wears all the hits, wears all the costs, has to do the education. And I'm sure, I don't know if you've read this, but Geoffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm. It's a really great book that talks about the fact a lot of businesses, we talk about the classic S-curve or hockey stick curve. That doesn't happen very often. And way before that, there's actually a chasm, which is if you can't get more than just the early adopters taking on board your technology, you literally drop into the chasm and you die, you never get out of it. And so it's how do you actually go from having the early adopters to actually having the sort of majority of people who are actually prepared to start using this product? And I think that the first people to market often don't, they're fighting all of that. They'll get the first people who are really excited because they're the early adopters, but they haven't managed to actually get the majority of people actually interested.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And that's what happened to us. And interestingly enough, there's a company in the US called Striver, STRIVR. They're pretty much doing what we're doing. But in 2016, they were at a American football match and they were using some VR for that. And one of the executives of Walmart tried it out and they thought, oh, this is amazing, let's talk about it. And now Striver are training 1.5 million Walmart employees and the Verizon employees, and they're absolutely gone massive and they're pretty much doing the same thing as us. But then again, America is usually ahead, sometimes 3 or 4 years. And also, I think they're more open to things as well.
They've also got a bigger market. I mean, this is what we do. We don't understand. When I have my American guests come on the podcast, they'll talk about small business. And I have to say to them, be very careful because a small business in New Zealand or Australia is, something under 100 employees. Your small business can be 1,000 employees and a large business is tens of thousands of employees. The scale is just so different. And so even getting a very tiny slice of the pie in America can mean huge amounts of income for the business.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And even American investors, they're more open to investing. There was a bit of a bugbear of mine as well. I don't know if we can talk about that, but we bootstrapped, right? Because we thought, with investment, they usually want to see you producing sale, right? And we think, well, if we get sales, then why do we need investment? And so we bootstrapped, and looking back now in hindsight, I probably should have gone after investment. But the thought of one of our mentors, very successful, 3 startups, very successful, he said, if you're going to go down the investment path, you'll be doing that full time for a year. And I thought, I don't even want to do it. I don't really like going after investors. But now, if I was to do a startup again, depending on the timing, I still think if you can bootstrap, I mean, there's people like Canva, Atlassian, they're huge, and they are bootstrapped actually, which is amazing. And it's great if you can be in control of your own company, of course. But sometimes, like looking back, if we could have got investment, say, in 2021, and then put all that into marketing and sales mainly, then I think we'd be in a completely different space right now.
Yeah. It is interesting that when I was doing my work at the Ice House, a lot of the American investors, they only want to invest in their own backyard. There's not an awful lot of American investors who come over and invest in Kiwi technology or Australian technology. They tend to be very much about, they want to have something that's close to where they live that they can kind of be involved in. So it's hard. I don't know what's the investment scene like in Australia these days?
Well, I mean, I've interviewed some VCs. I've interviewed some people from Lend for Good as well. So there's different spaces. So you've got like the mums and dads sort of investors, when someone starts off, it gets them going. And then you might have the angel investors, like here, the Sydney Angels and that sort of thing. You might get up to like $1 million. And then there's the VCs, of course, they're all looking for the unicorns, like the 1 billion above. And so they might invest in, say, 20 or 40, and one gets to $1 billion and they get 100x their investment. But the problem is, what about everybody in between? And particularly, and I think you said at the start, I'm particularly interested and passionate about the social enterprise impact space, people doing something for good. And it's really hard to get investment in that space. But there are companies like Lend for Good and others, but there's a huge gap. In Australia, there's a $31 billion gap somewhere between the mums and dads, angels, and the VCs in that space. And so, yeah, it's very hard for people in that space, and even for anyone, because if they're looking for the unicorn, you have to have something that can scale dramatically worldwide. I mean, some people would say that's what a startup is. There's all different definitions. To be honest, like when I started, I didn't even know what a startup was. People say startup, I say, oh, what's that? Oh, I'm a startup. Okay.
I think it's interesting because I think the term entrepreneur gets interchanged with startup. And my view of an entrepreneur is something very, very different to a startup. But you're right. When it comes to investment, most people who are looking to invest are looking to get big returns. And the only thing that can genuinely scale to that kind of level is usually a tech startup. So there's a lot of really for good businesses out there that are doing amazing things, but they're not going to be the scalable, sustainable return type business that those investors are actually looking for. So it's challenging because they're the ones that will actually make the biggest difference, but they won't make the biggest dollars.
Yeah, exactly. And it just depends. Like there are some investors that will, invest because they want to make a difference, but unfortunately they're few and far between.
Okay, so a couple of things that we've kind of learned on the journey so far. So first of all, MVP, don't go out and make all the bells and whistles. Start with something small, test it with your market, make sure there's a real need for it. I guess don't necessarily believe what people say, as in they'll tell you that they want it and they'll tell you that it's great, but there's a difference between telling you want something than actually opening up your wallet and handing over cold hard cash to purchase that thing. Getting the right people around you is pretty important, and being able to measure them on their effectiveness so that you can really see if they are moving the needle, as I call it, in the business. And sometimes knowing timing was really important, right? So being at the right time, perhaps not being the first to market. Any other lessons that really stand out for you?
Well, yeah, get investment if you need it. Like you shouldn't necessarily bootstrap. If you can, it's great. If it works for you, I'd say don't fall in love with your employees, so to speak. Who are feeling sorry, like, if they have to move on, they'll get something else. You have to look after your business first. And yeah, also, obviously, you got to maintain your mental health as well. Like startup world is brutal and there's so many ups and downs, it's a roller coaster. So you need to maintain your mental health. And I've interviewed many people on my podcast that have burnt out. Some of them actually in large corporations, and then they started a startup, some in the startup themselves. In fact, I was interviewing a doctor just last week, and she pretty much got burnt out herself, and she's a doctor. So you got to maintain that. Actually, I was in a talk about a year ago to a whole bunch of young startup hopefuls by these, startup founders and mentors. And they were saying, if you want to make it in the startup world, you've got to work 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. I thought, I'm not going to swear on your podcast, but you idiots, I mean, seriously, like, how are you going to tell these young guys that? Like, they can burn out in 6 months, 1 year. It's going to be useless. Like, be passionate, but you got to maintain your health and your mental health, and you're not going to do it like that. You can only do that for so long, and then
I was going to say, you can do that in short sprints, I think. I think it's, sometimes there are times when the business absolutely needs it. If you're doing that consistently, whether that be a startup or an established business, let's be realistic, it's just not sustainable.
And you got to think always, well, why are you doing this? So it's really important as well. You have to believe in what you're doing, not do it for the money, so to speak. Like, you'd be crazy to do a startup for money, thinking, I want to be a unicorn, I want to be a billionaire, and I want to build rockets to Mars, like all the rest of them. No, that's not a good reason. Like, be passionate, try and do something that you believe in, know your purpose. That's really, really important, particularly if you want to sustain it. And also, of course, it gets to a point, and I think this is the hardest thing, right? And we're at that point quite a few times. Okay, what do we do? Do we keep going, or do we stop here? And I always remember that image of, the guy digging for gold. He's going through the dirt, and he's like an inch away, and then he stops. I always thought, oh, that's us, but we've got to keep going a bit more. But look, in hindsight, anyone can say, oh, I should have this, I should have that. But if really not going well, then sometimes you think, oh, but I've wasted all this time and all this money. Well, sometimes you just got to think, well, maybe it's best to pack it in now before you double up on all of that, and it doesn't work, I guess. But it's a really hard call, I guess.
I think in that case, and I've had that myself as well. So I've had a couple of business failures, as you know, and the thing for me was that I actually had to have external people around me who could help me to make that decision, because you become so passionate about what you're doing, what you're trying to do. You also, as you said, have put all this money, time, effort, your life into this thing, and you just really want it to work. But I think with me, I had to actually get some external people in to give me some objectivity and just sort of, know when it was time to actually call it quits. And I always like to reposition and kind of go, yep, sure, it failed, but it was just another expensive MBA. It was a great learning opportunity.
Yeah. I mean, I interviewed one of the founders of Twitter. His nickname's Rabble, really interesting guy. And he was saying, look, most founders in that, they'll go through like 7 different startups before they become successful. The funny thing is, well, talking about MVPs as well, that these guys were actually developing a podcast, like the first one, right? And then, there was some issues, and then they said, look, let's do a hackathon, which they did over a week or something. And then they came up with 12 different ideas, right? So they said, okay, let's go with these 3. And one of those was Twitter, okay? And so he says, when people say to me, Twitter looks like it was made in a day, he said, yeah, it was made in 6 hours. But then using the customer feedback constantly, they improved it, over time. So that just shows you can, Twitter, they made it in 6 hours, and then they just improved it over time. So, look, it depends what space you're in, and it's not that complex, but it just goes to show you. And he also says it's all about who you know as well. So, it's your network and your contact. The most important thing is your network and contacts, particularly in the startup world. And then, you can go from one to another, and people respect you. They know who you are. And like, as you probably know, Debra, as well, even in the sales space, and, it's what you build up over time, your own personal, people that will recommend you, and the people in your network, and the respect they have for you. And you build that up over a long period of time, which does make it difficult for young people, haven't got that big network.
But then you just need to reach out and ask for help, right? And this is one of my biggest lessons that I learned many, many years ago, is that it's okay to ask for help. We cannot possibly know everything, and we need to actually do it. And, people actually enjoy helping you. So when you ask for help, you're actually making that person feel good about being able to help you. So don't feel afraid to go, I don't know it all. I'd love to have some help.
No, it's a really good point. In fact, most people that are a bit miserable and not happy are ones that are always focused on themselves. That's why, it's like for me, as we discussed before, it's all about the journey. Okay. So like, okay, we'll get to this goal. I want to be this unicorn. Okay. I'm now on this unicorn. Am I happy? Am I satisfied? Is my life? No. In fact, I interviewed somebody that's really into that space, knows all these people, and said like half of them are really miserable because maybe they got there and then they just don't have anyone really close to them anymore, or the way they got there, well, that may not have been a great path. They've got money, but money's nothing. Like when you leave this place, planet Earth, you don't take any of that stuff with you, but you will take all the good things that you've done, all the growth that you've had. And that's why I don't look at my time in the startup world as a failure. I look at it as an amazing time where I learned so much. I met amazing people. To be honest, it was brutal, but I had a ball as well. And, I wouldn't, if I had my chance again, I'd do it again.
Yeah, I'm the same. I think a lot of those people, I always thought that they're on the hamster wheel, right? It's like, when I get to this, then it'll be better. And then they get there, it's like, when I get to this, it'll be better. When I get to this, it'll be better. It's like, actually, you've got to really enjoy what is going on as it's going on, and really take the lessons from it, because, as you said, money can't be taken with you, but all those experiences, the people around you, absolutely can be. And I also think that if you can learn from the lessons, sure, they can be quite tough, but they help to build resilience. It means that life will become easier as you go through it as well. So, yeah. So you've interviewed lots of people on your podcast about, failure and what failure is for them and how they got through it. They've shared their stories. Is there any common threads on there?
Common threads? Yeah, like we were talking about before, people holding on for too long. In fact, recently I interviewed this lovely girl, got a startup. She's been going for, I think, a couple of years, big development going on. And so I don't think she's really tested it with enough people. And she said, I don't have an MVP. I have a MLP, not minimal viable product, minimal lovable product. I thought, and it didn't register. Then after I thought, not good. Like, you're in love with your product, which is great, but up to the point where you just want to develop it and you just know, and that's me, right? That was me as well. Like, yeah, this is going to be amazing. Everyone's going to love it. And that's a mistake. And I actually, after the podcast, I wrote her a nice email saying, just be careful with that. And, from my experience and others, and, so that worried me a bit. So keep going when, or just falling in love with your product. Or I'll tell you another big mistake that people make, that they become their business or startup. That's them. They're like, I'm my business. Like, if I talk about YesVR, yeah, I'm YesVR. No, you are Paul. You're over here. You're an individual, and that's just your business. If you're a CEO, that's just your title. And because if you can separate that, or if you can't, then when something happens, it's like, it failed, business failed. Oh my God, I failed. I'm YesVR. I'm the CEO. I failed. No, that failed, but you're over here, you're continuing on, you're learning, so people that identify really deeply with their startup, like it's them, so I think that's another big mistake as well. And also people that don't maintain their mental health properly. And the main things with mental health that most people do that are successful with that, number one is sleep. Get enough sleep, get good sleep, exercise, good diet, and also, socialize, get out there with people. Like, even myself at the moment, I'm working from home, but I get out often and I see some of my ex-founder friends and visit places. I think it's really important as well. I mean, everyone's a bit different in that area, but one other thing as well, I would say, highly recommend, is being in a space with other founders. Even if, look, If you can get there physically, sometimes great, more, even better. But having that connection and that communication with other startup founders, more than mentors, because you can get mentor whiplash because one mentor says this, one says that, one says the other, right? But if you're in a room with a bunch of founders, there's nothing better than that to work things out because they're on the same journey as well. And I found that with a lot of people I interviewed, they think exactly the same thing. And a lot of them, like I did at the beginning, have this mentor whiplash. People really try to help you and do the right thing, but they say, no, you should do this, this, and this, and the other. This. Like, oh my God, what? Sometimes I got off calls in the early days, like, what do I do? What do I do? And I just felt like my head was going to explode.
Yeah, and that's one of my things I've always had. I've done a lot of mentoring as well as coaching. And I think, as mentors, we are there to kind of share experiences and tell you what we think you should do. But they're not there to coach. And I think a coach is a person who can actually help you come up to the right decision by asking the intelligent questions. A mentor is more likely to tell you based on their experiences. So if you've got multiple mentors, you're right, they're pulling you in all different directions. But the peer group, I think all these things we're talking about are relevant for startups, but they're also relevant for business owners, even established business owners. Having a peer group where people are going through the same things as you and can share from their own experiences and having the experience at the same time as you is in some ways far more powerful than having a mentor who's done it before. So, yeah.
Yeah, and the startup world, like startup founders, we are a bunch of weirdos. And that's a quote from the Twitter founder. We were really weird. In the way that a lot of people can't relate to us because we're like, a lot of us are risk takers and the stuff we're doing. You talk to other people and they're like, oh, okay. Even like my wife and kids are like, yeah, okay. And you talk to other founders like, yeah, we're all passionate and you can relate to each other. So you got to get it with the other weirdos. So just...
Same with business. I mean, businesses that end up becoming, established businesses from startups, it's a different breed. I mean, I'm married to an actuary. And I'm an entrepreneur. I mean, I've done many, many different businesses and I still have my fingers in many, many pies as well. I'm married to an actuary. There's no way in the world he'll ever understand what I do. Because if you think about every single spectrum, taking risks, he's got to have all the facts and all the figures and then he'll only take calculated risks and then it'll be very, very low risk. Whereas I'm like, sure, it'll be okay. It'll be all right. What's the worst that can happen? That's always my favorite quote. What's the worst that can happen? And so far, a few bad things have happened, but not the end of the world.
Here's a bit of a story. Like I interviewed that doctor recently and she does actual end of life care, right? And she was saying that the main thing that people will say, what do you regret at the end of life is not taking more risk and not doing things. So there you go.
Yeah, there you go. We should die pretty happy when we eventually get there, I guess. Hey, look, we could talk for hours, but I do try and keep these things reasonably short just so people have a chance to listen to them all. Tell me very quickly about your podcast. So you obviously are interviewing people who are sharing their failures and telling you what they've learned from them.
It's called Startup Fail Wisdom, one word, podcast. I actually started with another, I absolutely want to fail in the title because I'm like, no, I'm going to change fail as a meaning. I'm going to make it something good. And then I went to a couple of founder friends and I said, I was actually going to call it the Failed Startup Founders Podcast. So I talked to some friends like startup. They said, Paul, we're not coming on your show with that name. I looked at all these other names and I'm like, oh, what do I do? Chat GPT and like I ended up with Startup Journeys Founders Unplugged. So if you go to my pod, you'll see the first episodes like that. And I was never happy with it. I'm never happy. And then a friend of mine, Bernie, said, Paul, actually another person I interviewed is a friend of mine. Actually, he's a Hollywood director. They call him director's director because I did some courses with him. Beautiful man, Mark W. Travis. Listen to his podcast; it's wonderful. And he said, "Paul, you should keep fail there if a word is that's what you really wanted." And I said, "Yeah, you're right." So after, and I was searching again, and I thought fail wisdom. And I said to my wife, "Said, can you have two words together?" She's a teacher, right? And she said, "You like English teacher?" Yeah, of course you can. Conjugated word. And I said, I was hopeless in English. I'm teaching IT, right? And so I thought, that's it, the Startup Fail Wisdom podcast. And I was just like, it's like it clicked, like, that's it. That's what I want. So I've just actually building my website at the moment. It will be released next week. So it's failwisdom.com. But the story is that I wanted to help other founders that were like early stage founders where I was and entrepreneurs all those years ago, I didn't have a business background, didn't know anything. Like, I'm a dummy. I still am a dummy, but I learned from all these people from my failures and all of their failures as well. So I have highly successful people and others that, like Bernie, that was like my second or third episode, that his crypto thing was hacked $5 billion and completely collapsed. Like, there's all sorts of stories, amazing stories, but it's all about stories because people love stories. And I think that's the best way to learn. And then, we talk about failures and other things as well. So it's to help early stage founders. And I've been really passionate about the social enterprise impact space as well. So that's my purpose, is to help as many founders as I can. So hopefully have a easier journey than I had.
That's wonderful. And look, I think a lot of the lessons that we're talking about for startups are just as valid for established business owners as well. And so, I think if you look at like one of my favorites is Richard Branson, right? Richard Branson had several failures before he ever became successful. He was bankrupt twice, I think. So, we all go through this, and one day we come out the other side and everything's rosy. But I think without all of these, if you want to call them failures, but these learnings, we would never get to where we get to. So I think it's important to share those stories.
Absolutely, yeah. And, we're both similar in that way, that we believe in that as well. So it's been great being on your podcast today.
Been lovely to have you. I'm looking forward to actually returning the favor and come and telling you a few of because I've had at least 2 failures so far. So I'd love to tell you a little bit about that. But thank you for your time and thank you for sharing your lessons. And hey, let's hope that this is a phoenix rising from the ashes. But if not, I tell you what, you'll have learned so much that there'll be another something that is going to be your thing.
Absolutely. Lots of personal growth and it's just been an amazing journey, and I'm really looking forward to having you on the show as well, Debra.
Fantastic.
Thank you for having me today.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Paul.
Pleasure.